Right, we have our panelists already in studio to take us through a raft of issues that we'll be discussing this morning. Also, remember you can chime in. Of course, you can use the hashtag Decision2017. Allow me to introduce to you the former Nairobi gubernatorial candidate, Miguna. Also, we do have James Mureu, who is the vice chair of the Kenya Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Also, we do have with us Senator Kimani or Matangi from Kiambu. A very good morning to you, gentlemen.
Morning, Debarl.
And congratulations, and I don't know what to say now to Miguna, pole sana. James Mureu, good to see you, right? But I want to also say, yes, it has been a bruising battle in Nairobi, in Kiambu, and finally, of course, the verdict of Kenyans is on the ground. What is your immediate reaction, Miguna, so far as you watched over the campaigns that you've been also going mashinani to various slums, making inroads to where the wananchis were?
Well, my first reaction is that in the whole, the electoral process was peaceful and orderly, so that was a good thing. And the second one is that any democratic exercise like the one we've just gone through and actually have not, the process has not completed or has not concluded, is work in progress. A democratic process is not an event, and the democratization of Kenya and creating a society based on the rule of law and constitutional democracy, in practice and theory, is not something that will happen overnight. It will not happen in a week or a month or a year. It will not happen in a decade. It is a process that evolves, and we are on that track. As long as we stay on that track and maintain the tenets of democracy, then it's a good thing. For those who think that winning an election is the end of democratic exercise, those ones do not understand the word democracy and have never understood the struggle for democratization in Kenya. Our electoral process is not perfect, far from it, and in fact there is none which is perfect in the world. We are aiming to perfection. That is what human society must always aim for, and that is what I expect to see. Our electoral body is not yet where I would be satisfied that that everything regarding the exercise is free, fair, and credible. For instance, I wish to see a state where the electoral officers conduct themselves judiciously. The comportment, the statements, the optics must be almost like, as a lawyer, I go to court. Yes. And at the end of the process, a judge comes and pronounces judgment, and you don't see any reaction one way or the other. The judge is not happy, the judge is not sad, the judge simply renders judgment. And if you dispute the judgment, you appeal, but the judge is not aligning himself or herself with any side. The judge is not hugging, the judge is not expressing any emotion. You just finish the process, you announce the result, and you move on. Because that is why the chair, for example, and the commissioners must qualify, must have the same qualifications as judicial officers. Because you are expected to exercise equidistance from the contestants. You are neither Jubilee, nor NASA, nor a member of any political party as such. So that is what will heal the country. So right now there is a lot of tension. I am hoping that the tensions will cool down. I'm happy that the president has made statements that are commendable in terms of extending an olive branch, asserting the right of people who are not satisfied with the results to reject the results if that's what they want to, and also to demonstrate peacefully and armed, which is provided for in the Constitution. This is what will build a real democracy. And I hope that we are heading there.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from James Mureu.
Yeah, thank you very much, Debarl. I think for a long time, Kenyans and this sort of becomes a cycle. Every 5 years, Kenyans are put through this process again and again and again. And the truth is, whether we want to pretend that what is happening is an accident or an act of God, we can point fingers at certain people to blame, really. And my blame goes straight back to the politicians, the contestants. Because to many of these contestants, democracy is when they win. Free and fair elections is only when they win. If they lose, they don't lose for a good reason. And they subject the Kenyans who actually wake up early in the morning to go and queue and exercise their democratic right to vote to painful process thereafter. Debarl, you will notice all those people who are calling people to mass actions, not to go to work, they are working themselves in the very act of telling people not to go to work. That's what they are employed to do. That's what they live for. If they don't do that, they don't earn their pay. But the poor Kenyans who don't go to work will risk losing their jobs at the behest of these so-called politicians. Now, when you bear the word honorable before your name, honorable so-and-so, honorable so-and-so, you must pay a price for that name. You cannot just be a rogue honorable person. It's a complete disconnect. And you find these same politicians are the ones who have refused to concede. And I challenge any contestant who has not had the courage and conviction to go and congratulate the winner and accept the loss is really cheating Kenyans. And that is where we are right now. That all of them are taking us around. Nobody wants to admit they lost because they lost and their tribe. And then suddenly they retreat to their tribes and they say, now we are being marginalized, now we're being sidelined. And yet they went into a contest knowing well that there will be only one winner and the rest of them will be losers. So I think time has come for us to look at this whole issue of elections, and the cycle must be cut. I speak from a business person's perspective, yes, where we are saying, right now, the last 5 days, 7 days since elections, we, the business community, are paying the brunt of these elections. We went and voted, exercised our democratic right, and left this process to be completed by IEBC. Instead, what we hear is ups and downs, and people want to take us the wrong direction, and we never asked for all this. The business person wants to open their shop the following day, and that's what we said. We were on media houses, in all the media houses, saying, guys, this time we want to do it differently. We want to go and vote and go straight back to work. In fact, the same day, I remember speaking to the border operators in Mombasa, and I said, guys, this will be your boom day, the day of election. You ferry, do business as usual, and go back to sleep in the evening. Mm-hmm. What followed, and the statements, the irresponsible statements by the politicians, is really what has thrown this country into the situation they're in. And they're responsible. I don't want to pretend that anybody else should bear the brunt of this. Right. It is the irresponsible utterances by the politicians, and we've seen them on TV and everywhere else. They are saying things that ought not to be said to the public.
Thank you. All right. Let's
take responsibility.
Let's take responsibility. We hear also from Senator Kimani Matangi. Good morning.
Morning, Debarl, and thank you. Let me first start by congratulating Kenyans and thanking them. First, for coming out in large numbers. As predicted, we hit the 15 million plus mark in voter turnout. And that was exceptional because, one, as we had debated here before and discussed, the number of people, voters registered by ABC then was quite high, 19.7 million. Well, as a person, I had expected the voter turnout to be around 17 million or so. It's a little lower than that, but however, still good enough. Let me also take the opportunity to thank the people of Kiambu for having confidence in me and showing confidence in me and giving me back my job as their senator. Mm-hmm. And as I said when I was getting my certificate, I said to the people of Kiambu, yes, I will work not only hard but diligently to make sure that I deliver on the agenda of the people of Kiambu. Let me also congratulate my good friend, Miguna, because he came out to fight a big battle a big battle. In the fighting for the governorship of Nairobi is no mean task. He came out to a big arena. Somehow he didn't have most of the financial muscle and wherewith of the other contestants, but he fought gallantly, and it's a good Miguna that you made your mark, and you've also not gone to court to contest
We still have 7 days.
the results. So, I mean, from what I know of you, I don't expect you to be going to court anyway. But you've lived to fight another day, and I wish you very, very well. I wish most of the people would be like you in other contestations.
But we've not heard from Miguna conceding defeat.
Well,
Because I don't have to.
There's
no law saying you must.
His actions are evidence enough that he's content. Now, let me also say, as some of my colleagues here have said, that contrary to what most politicians think or believe, and my surprise a little, let me say this, is how far behind most politicians are being left by the fast movement of the psyche of Kenyans right now in adjusting to the new calls of democracy and our new status quo as a country since we got our constitution in 2010. I mean, you realize that most of the time and majority of the politicians, and you have to draw a line from a certain clique of politicians who were there before, long way before. You find people who have contested 3, 4, 5 times. They have been largely unable to adjust to a more modern voting Kenyan population. I'll tell you why. If you look at even not only the presidential election, because I would be talking about that later, but if you look at most of the areas where there are contestations about victories, you find that it is largely the old guard who feel and believe they're entitled to leadership. So once they lose an election, you find that they will hardly want to agree that they have lost the election. But unfortunately, if you look, and I want you to look at what has happened to the country in the last few days, anybody who can't see that Kenya has changed is really in a different world of his own. Because calls have been made, things have been said, lamentations have been aired, criticism and all manner of negative talk, including, of course, most of what we've heard from the presidential contestant, in the NASA side, on the NASA side. But if you look at the way Kenyans have reacted, that is the most amazing part to me, because you find that Kenyans have defied completely anyone now who thinks, and there's a cartoon the Nation drew the other day, and I want to congratulate them also, the NMG group. With that cartoon where you drew most of foreign journalists waving back at our country, boarding their planes back to their country and saying the kind of stuff we expected here is not what we are getting. Because Debarl, if you remember, in 2013, when we went to the election, every hotel in Nairobi was occupied by foreign journalists who had come here with cameras and tapes ready to record massacre and bloodbath and mass deaths, thinking that the story and the events of 2007 and 2008 are a description of who we are and what we are going to be, not knowing that that was one unique break away from our norm and tradition of belief in our patriotism and our country. And then once they got disappointed in 2013, I can tell you for sure, because I was very close to some of the events and I would watch some of the reactions even as results were announced.
Yes.
You could hardly fail to see the disappointment in most of the people. So my statement, my remarks are this, that I want to say to not only the political contestants currently in the country, but even those willing to join politics, and even foreign observers who are here and other countries. This country is different. Kenyans are different. We see things. We want a country of our own. We have our destiny firmly in our hands, and we know where we are going as a country. And let me disappoint those who are. My friend here has really commented some of this, but let me disappoint most of these people. you know, what you're expecting, because part of the headlines that you run here is that the NASA head will be making some public pronouncements later about the outcome of the elections and so on. You remember yesterday there was a call to boycott work. The Nation Media Group itself has been a victim of some of these altercations, including a call to boycott buying or reading of the Nation newspaper and either, you know, subscribing or watching news on NTV. I mean, we can't stoop much lower than that. And allow me to take this one, and this is personal to me. I'll tell you why. I watched from the first day when the NASA chief, Raila Amolo Odinga, went on to dispute the elections with his team. Alongside him was one good friend of mine called James Mureu, whom I sit with in the Senate. And he has been largely vocal, and he was the one who was making these comments. And I wanted to remind my friend Orengo that I actually watched on one of the media stations when he received his certificate in Siaya, having been elected the senator for Siaya. And when he stood alongside Raila to make those comments, he did not come along with his certificate to tear it in public and throw it and say, I'm a beneficiary of this awful or hacked system, that I do not believe in this election, and so I surrender my position because I'm unduly elected myself.
Thank you.
And so, you know, what I'm saying is that there has to be an end to the gimmickry, to the tricks, to the games. We must know that the stakes of more than 42 million Kenyans are up, and we will make our decision firm that we want the country, we want peace, we want forward movement.
Thank you.
That is a chapter closed by us as a people of the election, and now we want to look at the future and build our country.
All right. Miguna, looking at the whole gamut of the electioneering process, from the registration right to the transmission and declaration, do you think it was free, fair, and credible?
Yeah, Debarl, I wanted to say also, when you asked me about my response.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, anybody who denies that after the declaration of the presidential election, we've had challenges and problems, would be living in another universe. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is that some people have demonstrated their grief, their loss, quote unquote, because they don't believe they lost. And some people have demonstrated in celebration. And those who have demonstrated in celebration have not encountered a response, a negative response from the security forces. And those who have demonstrated their displeasure with the result have met with brute force. And many of them are dead. I mean, I listened to the Secretary General of the Red Cross.
Yes.
And he talked of more than 10 people, I think it was 18 or 17 people, who have died because of either being beaten or shot at by the police. And this has to be condemned, because many of these encounters were not necessary. Demonstrations are allowed constitutionally in this country. Anybody can demonstrate peacefully, unarmed. And I've not seen any clip of anyone who was armed. I took great offense at the statements that were made by Mr. Koome, the coordinator of the police in Nairobi,
yes,
alleging that there was an encounter of people armed with AK-47 against the police. That has not, there is no evidence at all in support of that. And in fact, to the contrary, a young girl was shot and killed by the police. And he needed to take responsibility for that. This needed to be condemned. And the girl's family needed to be condoled. It is wrong, I disagree with my friend Matangi. It is wrong to assume that democracy requires unanimity. That's not a democracy. That may be a theocracy. Maybe even Iran, which is a theocracy. There are people who disagree. Human beings are vibrant human beings. They have brains. They don't have to agree all the time or on all issues. And they can't agree not all the time in a democratic process in a contest like this. The fact that somebody disagrees with you doesn't mean the person is wrong and you are right. The fact that you have won an election or been declared having won doesn't mean that you are right and the other person is wrong. It doesn't mean also that the mere declaration of an election means that the process was free, fair, and credible. So we must be careful when we make these statements, because what is credible, what is free, fair, it must not just be free, fair, and credible, it must be seen to be so. So, for example, there have been serious allegations that have been made and have been part of this process. So I know there have been issues. For example, the chairman of the Electoral Commission, Mr. Chebukati, acknowledged that there was an attempted hacking of the system. So take that, for example.
Yes.
It was a public admission. So we need to know who attempted to hack the system, when did they attempt to hack the system, how did they attempt to hack the system, how did they fail, and for what purpose did they attempt to hack the system? So we need the Electoral Commission to come out clearly and tell us that.
Yes.
Secondly, for instance, the mere fact that Form 34 A's and B's were completed doesn't mean they tally with the ballots that were cast. So we need to be sure that, because you know, I can count 1,000, but in fact the tallies are 300, and complete the form as 1,000. And have people sign it.
Yes.
We need to be able to determine that, in fact, the forms that were declared reflect the will of the people. And that the Electoral Commission can do to push down the temperatures and make everybody accept the result. We also know of instances in Nairobi, for example, where electoral officers, some of them took off from the station wherever they went. And then they have been arrested, they have been taken to court, for instance. And the electoral process happened in their absence. We also know of instances where ballot papers were found with individuals who are not authorized to have them.
Yes.
In Nairobi, for example. So we can't, in all fairness, just sweepingly say everything was very nicely done and it was all credible. It is another thing to say, however, that, for instance, with the presidential tally, and I have no evidence to say that they were not credible, that the results declared did not reflect the will of the people. If, in fact, the Right Honorable former Prime Minister has evidence, as he claims he does, we would expect him to do a few things. One, you can reject the results, or you can concede. You can also reject and petition, or you can reject and do other things. You can hold peaceful demonstrations as provided for by law. You can do nothing. You can also initiate processes that will make this system more transparent and credible as a Democrat and as a Kenyan. You can also retire. You can resign from ODM. You can initiate processes of making Kenya a more democratic system and becoming a statesman. So he has many other options. So to call on him or to subject him to surrender when he doesn't believe that the system was free, fair, and credible would also be undemocratic. But I would urge him to go to court. I urge him to go to court because there may be, from what I have gleaned from Honorable Orengo's statements, that there could be justiciable issues that would have to be aired in a court of law.
Thank you.
But the issues that cannot be aired in a court of law must and can be aired outside courts of law, because courts of law only deals with actionable issues that can be litigated, issues that a court of law can declare a verdict on.
Right, thank you.
Yes.
And maybe even before we go to a short break right now, the question would be again, was there any tearing rush by the IBC also to actually make this announcement? They had until today. If there were issues that were being raised, like they want access to the database that they think, of course, someone really gamed the system. And as you mentioned, of course, the issues of hacking were also raised, which were valid concerns as well.
Yes.
Given such a scenario where, yes, people were raising questions about the credibility of the system itself, wouldn't it be fair maybe to extend this time to also address this issue before you make a declaration? Let's hear from Mureu before we come to you.
Thank you, Debarl. I think, in fairness to IEBC, who apparently had only 7 months to organize these elections, really, and having had to contend with so many other challenges, I believe they carried out largely, and I dare say largely, free and fair elections. Now, whether Kenyans wanted a perfect election, that's another story. But if you look at the way the outcome was received, and whether they had more time, the pressure was really building on them. And on the one hand, somebody saying, announce the results. On the other hand, they said they don't want any manual interference, they want electronic devices. I was privileged to have gone around as a Kenya National Chamber observer. And I can say without any doubt that at every polling station, I witnessed the presiding officer calling us. I signed some of the forms in Mombasa where the election has been completed, the tally has been done, and he asks all the agents, does anybody have any questions? No. Can I press this send button? Yes, press the send button. And to me, that is where I completed my elections. And I observed that across the whole Mombasa. Now, what happened thereafter is what really brought about a lot of heat, where people, and I want to say this without fear of contradiction, that the NASA leadership started saying the election has been rigged even before all the results had been received from across the whole country, where the National Tallying Center at Bomas of Kenya was actually collating all this information and putting it across to us. Now, when you start generating that heat across the whole country, then it starts building up. And to the IEBC, it starts now putting them under a lot of pressure. Whether it is the manual system that has become slow because physically the from 34A and 34B had to be delivered from the polling station and the constituent tallying center to Bomas of Kenya for tallying. That is a process that takes time. But if you look at this, the NASA team started agitating for results to be announced. And they even said, according to their tally, which again was not supposed to be the case, because this country does not belong to any single individual. Unfortunately, you hear politicians say, I am asking my supporters. They are his supporters. They are at his call and behest, that they should do this and they should do this. And this is where we get it wrong. The IEBC tried their best. The last, if you remember, the presidential ballot papers was barely printed because of all these court processes. And this IEBC is a complete new team that was brought in again at the insistence of the opposition. They demonstrated. They closed businesses here in Nairobi for a long time just to get the new IEBC commissioners in place. They are given new, and I wonder when they will ever be satisfied. And for me, I really don't care about the politicians. All I care is about our businesses. And I want to remind politicians here today that we are the people who bear the brunt of all these shenanigans, the business community. We have had 5 days, 7 days, no work because of these threats of demonstrations. If you want as a politician to demonstrate, get out yourself physically in the streets and call people to order and exercise that democratic space. Don't tell our children from the, and they actually take advantage of the slums, which is very, very bad. They go to the slums, they pull these guys out, this poor fellow gets killed, and these guys retreat back to their current plush houses and relax. And they say today was a very busy day because they called everybody, mass action, go to the streets, go demonstrate. But you will never, and I want to say this, I want to see politicians taking the front line with their family, their wives and children, and saying, let's go now and demonstrate, and let them be the front line. Because then they take responsibility of that demonstration, peaceful demonstration. It is their responsibility to keep it largely peaceful. If they don't do that, then none of these Kenyans, even from the slums and from wherever, should actually follow them.
Thank you.
That's my take.
All right, we've got a minute just to go to, of course, on a short break right now. Of course, we want to do it right now. We'll come to you.
Didn't I have
Yeah, we'll come back. We'll circle back with you. It is 7 o'clock on the nose. We want to take a short break right now. When we come back, we continue this conversation, of course, reviewing the election process and moving forward. What is actually up the collective sleeves of NASA and also the Jubilee administration as well. Don't go away. Much more coming up on the other side of the break. Welcome back. You're watching Decision 2017, and of course, we continue with our conversation here. Of course, on Decision 2017, I'm holding court this morning with Miguna, the former Nairobi gubernatorial candidate. Also, we have James Mureu, who's the vice chair of the Kenya Chambers of Commerce and Industry. We have also with us Senator Kimani Matangi, who's a senator from Kiambu as well. Eagerly waiting for Mithika Linturi to join us. It seems he won't do that. It's almost a few minutes past 7, so I think it's running late right now. But before we took a short break, we were all new. Senator Kimani Matangi?
Yes. Let me. I had
you have to sip.
I had you mention the name of Linturi. And Linturi, you know,
he was traveling from Meru yesterday, so he's meant to be here.
He's graduated now into a senator.
He's a senator now.
So he's still suffering the newly found bliss. But we'll be happy to have him next week.
Yes, thank you.
So, I mean, Debarl, you had asked a question here on didn't it appear like for example, that the IEBC were too fast in pronouncing the results, or not waiting for to address issues raised. Now let's first remember that we have a constitution, and the constitution really pronounces itself on various matters about the election. But besides that, we also have legislation which has been enabled purposely and precisely to guide us on how to go about an election, including the act that forms the IEBC. And see, one, we have to acknowledge that it is not unpremised that there will be deep disputes in an electoral process, including in the outcome of that election. And all that is not only captured, but it is provided for in law. Because the drafters of the Constitution, the parliament that passed those acts, saw it not only fit but right that any disputes would be either dealt with, adjudicated as per the law. And so when we ask, was the IEBC acting in conformity with the law, or were they not acting against the law? The answer would be no. Because you see, the IEBC has got a clear mandate on how they conduct their process, from the time when they go to the polling stations, to how they receive their results, to how they transmit them, how they are tallied, tabulated, and eventually a winner is announced. All the issues arising or matters arising as in the process have ways of being dealt with, but if there arises a dispute that cannot be addressed within that process, it is provided for clearly. And that's why what I also want to answer to what my good friend Miguna was saying, that indeed we should not either condemn or expect that, for example, the former Prime Minister would be contesting the results of the election. It is true, he has a right, a constitutional right to contest and to feel dissatisfied, any other dissatisfaction. The question here is, does he do that, or any other person, within the confines and provisions of the law? That's the simple issue. And so, any matter that any person may have felt they are aggrieved about was not conducted in a way, including in coming up with the results or tallying them, they can address that through a lawful process.
All right.
Now, what we've been speaking against, and I believe that's the voice I hear in this panel this morning, is that this country has got priorities, and we also have got choices to make. And remember the famous saying that choices have consequences, you know, because right now, we have a country to run, we have children to take to school, we have an economy to run. So my good friend here, Mr. Mureu, says, as a business person, and that is true. I mean, we've got affairs to run, we've got politics to run, we've got a country to move forward. But we also have those disputes to address. So the question here we should be asking ourselves is, because Matangi has a dispute with the outcome of an election, for example, does he have to bring the country to a standstill?
All right, maybe
to address those issues, and that's why we are Debarl with this debate. That's why we have to call things the way they are.
All right, thanks.
If anyone, including either the NASA chief or the NASA brigade or any other person, has got grievances about the outcome of the election, please proceed lawfully. Go to court, air your grievances,
Thank you.
Put them on paper,
all right.
Let a verdict be done, let life continue. Let
Thank you.
Kenyans live in peace,
All
let
right.
business be conducted.
Let me hear from Miguna. The 7-day window period that is given in here.
Yes.
Right? What is it for? Do you
Debarl,
really have to wait for the last day, or you can actually make the call very early?
Debarl, your first question was probably more cogent. Was the IBC precipitous or too fast in making
the
declaration?
Yes.
The answer is no. They can make declaration within 7 days. Within 7 days means from the time the counting ends and the results are announced from the polling stations and the constituency tallying center, because those results cannot be challenged by the national tallying center, the chairperson of the IBC or the IBC itself. Because the results that are announced for the presidential contest are recorded in Form 34A at the polling station.
Yes.
And they are recorded they are tallied, added up, and results declared on Form 34B at the constituency level. It is these results that are transmitted to the National Tallying Center, and the chair simply declares them. Now the question is, should the chair wait for all the results? The answer is no. At some stage, you make a decision that it doesn't matter the outstanding results, the results will not change. So say, for example, you get more than 80% of those Form 34Bs. And the conclusion is that given the range, somebody has already done 50 plus 1, the other person is far less and cannot catch up, will not be able to destabilize 50 plus 1. And you only need 50 plus 1 to declare the results. You can call the election. Then the official result will be contained on a final report by the IBC,
yes,
and delivered to the parties and to the country. So there was nothing in terms of timing which was wrong. I believe that what I personally did not like was the fact that Chebukati correctly stated that the figures that were being beamed by the media houses were not necessarily reflective of Form 34Bs. So the question that many of us had was, where were these coming from? Who was releasing them to the media if they were not reflective of Form 34Bs?
Yes.
And why is it that the country was not being told every time there was an input? When you are watching international elections, like the US elections and any other European elections, what you would be told is that the decision in the New York State has come in, and so is leading, and you see the change immediately on the screen as to who is ahead, who is behind, and with what kind of percentage reflective of the results declared in New York. When you move to Florida, the same. When you move to California, the same. And in fact, when it reaches a state which is a swing state, they would say, these states will decide the election. The unfortunate thing with Kenya is this, that we know the strongholds of Jubilee and President Uhuru Kenyatta vis-a-vis the Right Honorable the Prime Minister. So when Nyanza comes in, the former Nyanza, for example, the county is there, you would have expected to see that he's leading, or at least catching up if in fact the former Central Province had been announced and the president was ahead. Then when Coast comes in, you expect his figures to go up. You expect the president figures to come down. When Rift Valley comes in, the former Rift Valley, you expected the president figures to go up again. And you expected the Right Honorable Prime Minister's figures to come down. And we needed to see those on the screen.
Yes.
And so that at the end, you would see a graph that is zigzagging.
Yes.
But here we had a horizontal graph that did not change. This raises questions. Why was the margin the same at 11%? Who is it that was inputting the figures, and how were they inputted? Which counties came in first? Why was the president ahead at 54% from the beginning to the end? You know, these are legitimate questions. And if Chebukati is saying IBC was not putting in these figures,
yes,
who was? The press also must come out openly and tell us, where were you getting the figures from? Because we never saw the changes. I needed to see a zigzag. There needed to be a point at which the prime minister, the former prime minister, was ahead.
Yes.
There needed to be a point at which the president is leading now or overcomes that. And people needed to see that. That is the confidence that you have in the system. That was not explained. So when you ask the question, was the declaration precipitous? The answer is, depending on the explanation Chebukati had given that the results that were on the screen were not coming from 34Bs, then it looked like it was. But if he had been able to explain that, because he was not able to explain that, and we are still waiting for him to explain that, then there would be nothing wrong with what he announced. So everything depends on what you do. The Electoral Commission could have made this more transparent, more credible, but they failed. They failed in trying to explain this, and the media houses failed too.
What was also, because of course people have been arguing about the zigzagging of this particular line. It was very linear from the word go.
It was just the same.
It was just the same. And
that's
of course,
not how graphs work.
That's not how, truly. Yeah. But the question is, was also the projection of this from the go-getting of it misleading, right, to the public? Because of we were not told from whatever countries were they coming. We just saw numbers just streaming in and remaining constant at some point, and no one is catching up, or maybe President Uhuru Kenyatta is moving ahead, or Raila is lagging behind. Isn't that questionable? Why weren't the line zigzagging?
I don't know what to say about the zigzagging line, but I know that when the results started coming in, maybe I was like an observer in Mombasa, so I didn't see the initial results coming in. But all I can imagine is, if, for example, and I can't remember the order in which they came in, if the Central Province or the Mount Kenya region or the Rift Valley votes came in first, there must have been a huge deficit. I mean, a huge dent insofar as NASA's votes are concerned. So if they were playing catch-up all through, then there is a likelihood of that. I dare say this is really something I'm not sure how the initial tallying happened. I did follow subsequent results after we left the observation work. And I can tell you, if you look at areas where, for example, the governor of Kiambu, which was a big vote block, when Kabogo fell to Waititu, in whichever way they were announcing this has happened, that block, its entirety was President Uhuru Kenyatta's vote. So I would imagine with that block, for example, of close to 1 million votes or 900,000 votes. Now, if you bring in the other smaller constituencies that start reporting, before they can damage that 900,000 block, it's going to take a while. And if now, while they are trying to kill this deficit, another Rift Valley block comes in, I suppose that's my imagination. That's the only explanation I can give. But I want to just, I am attempting to give that explanation. We are still waiting for it. But I dare say this, Debarl. If you look at the pressure under which IEBC was put under, and this is where we must now have discipline, even as leaders, They were under so much pressure. They were being asked this question, and everybody was bullying them. Yet, if you understand what IEBC stands for, is an independent electoral commission that should have its independence. That all other bodies can only challenge that independence in court.
But that does not really
Now,
insulate them from being asked questions.
I agree,
So,
but in a structured way. If you look at what happened before, I think the second day of counting, or the first day of counting, as soon as results started coming in, NASA brigade said they have already counted and they have won, and these elections are, so it was now IEBC to start putting off this fire. The IEBC, I can tell you for a fact, the transmission of Form 34A was done correctly. And I remember that question about where they are getting these figures from. And they said, these are provisional outcomes subject to their verification with the Form 34A when it arrives at the tallying center. The one that was sent was electronically sent, again, at the insistence of the opposition. They said they don't want any manual effect on this whole electoral process. Now, when the electronically transmitted Form 34A was sent to IEBC, they now insisted on tallying with the actual physical form. Now, that took time, and that is where the heat was starting to generate. And for me, that is where I felt they were really being bullied. I mean, they should have been given a bit more latitude to be able to...
Maybe the better question will be again, before we come to you, Matangi, what was actually, because all the stakeholders were given this dummy run. I don't know if Miguna also you went to the IBC to actually...
We saw it. We
get
witnessed
the dummy run, right? Were there any provisions for these provisional results? Right?
No, there wasn't.
There wasn't.
And it is not there in law.
It is not there in law.
There is nothing like a provisional result.
So, no, just a moment. Yes. Just a moment. So if there was a dummy run that was done, we expect this is a dummy run, and it will run as is during the, the material day of the general election. Okay. So why didn't anyone really come and question also the provisional results? Because this is not what we were
one second. I don't think you are. I don't think you guys. No. I know. I'm coming. Just 1 second.
You will come to you because I just want to get to understand this as a layman. No, this is a question, but as a layman myself.
No, but I had issues.
No. Just we'll come to you. We'll come to you.
Honorable Matangi, my point is this, Debarl, and this nobody has even touched. Why were we not seeing the counties? You see, I'm trained to look for clinical evidence. The fact is, I needed to see the county. My friend is right to speculate, Mr. Mureu, that yes, it could have been Kiambu, then it could have been the former Rift Valley counties, but we didn't see that.
Yeah.
And the IBC has not told us that. I don't want to speculate on something I've not been told. Yes, NASA made a mistake in terms of their demands, initially and even in the course. That has to be admitted. For example, they were the ones who said, announce the results within 7 hours. I mean, they said so. They were the ones who said, and I warned them, insisting on the so-called pure electronic system. And I warned them, this thing can be hacked from even China. I mean, electronic system is the easiest to tamper with. But they insisted on that. Then later on, they asked for the manual system. Then later on, they said it was hacked. They have not told us the evidence. Then later on, they said the Right Honorable Prime Minister had won. We have not seen the actual evidence. So what I'm saying is, notwithstanding problems with the way NASA has executed their case, that would not take away from legitimate questions that we are asking about the process. Where were the numbers coming from? How did they come in? Why was President Uhuru Kenyatta ahead with 11% margin throughout, which is statistically impossible? Anybody who has done basic maths will tell you that cannot happen. You cannot have a graph that does not vary. It's not possible in life that you would have a straight graph.
No, it was climbing.
There was no, I watched it very closely. It was the same. They have not even denied it was the same. So I'm not saying Jubilee should be the one answering this question. Because you see, Jubilee was just a contestant like NASA. The question must be asked of the IEBC, and the IBC must answer this question. You see, my questions are aimed to make the system better. I am not saying that President Uhuru Kenyatta did not win, but I'm saying it would be good for him if the IBC explained how he won.
Thank you. Right, let's hear from Matangi. Matangi, your time now.
But before I answer, let me also make a statement, a serious statement.
A statement.
For purposes of the debate being fair, when a matter is on discussion, let Miguna comment on it when he has. Let the other person, let also me comment on it.
Okay.
Don't cut in between.
Right.
Because you've also invited me to the debate.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Fair enough.
But if you cut me again like that, then I would decline to answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would decline the invitation.
Thank you.
Yes. Because we have to be seen to be fair in the debate.
I understand.
Yes,
that's
very important. Now, my point is this. When I was watching this, when I was watching the transmission of these results, one thing I must say to the media, that if indeed we proceed the way we are proceeding, the media in reporting, for example, of election results will be left behind. The media may be irrelevant in the next election. I'll tell you why. If you watched what was happening, you went to the IEBC website and you had your TV screen on, the media, with what they were transmitting on the TV screens, were way behind what was on the IEBC websites. If you went to any candidate's results, for example, even not only presidential, even a member of parliament, senator, governor, the results as displayed on the IEBC websites was always way ahead what the media was reporting. And then I'll come to my second point here. I can validate my first point with my conclusion here. See, I've had this discussion about why was this graph looking linear, why was it consistent. First, the question I would want to ask is this. We have been here in this panel for the last many months. Can we, all of us, recall what the opinion polls had consistently for the last 6 months? The percentages. For more than 6 months. That percentage never changed for more than 6 months. Until the day when we went to the election. Actually, if there was any change, it was 2% or 1%. Between what probably, and these opinions were carried out by so many, so many, I see Miguna. Yes. Remember,
on which opinion
remember, we debated here the opinion polls as were done by Infotrack, by TIFA, and if you looked at the scales all the time, although on the result of who would lead, but the question of 42, 43, 44 to 48 to 53 never changed. But let me make my point here. Remember, NASA had gone to court. When NASA went to court, they sought a determination on one thing. The determination they sought is, are the results at the polling station as announced by the officer, by the polling officer there, final? And the court upheld the decision and said that the final result of the election is as announced at the polling station. So what did IEBC have to do? And why have I said the media was behind? What the IEBC did was they complied with the law. And when results were announced at the polling station, IEBC transmitted them as final results to their website. And what the media and probably those in the thought line of Miguna and NASA were expecting was that the results would be captured from Form 34B. Well, that was not lawful. That is not what the law said. The law said that the final result is the result announced at the polling station. So actually, the Form 34B and 34C were a formality. It was just a carry-on of what has already been announced as the final result. Now let's come to this story about a linear graph. And I would want any of you to quote which graph you saw. There was no graph. So when I hear everybody talking about it, there was a linear graph. There was no linear graph, Debarl. There was no graph that was drawn. If a graph that was drawn with micro indicators, then you would have seen a tilting. If you said it was a 0.0001 of the graph and then you continue to mark it, you would have seen a tilting. Do you know why it looked linear? It looked linear because when the results started trickling in and you had 1 million votes recorded for one candidate and 2 million votes recorded for the other candidate. Remember, these results are coming in per polling station. Yeah. Now, how many number of people did one kit transmitter is able to hold as per the law? 700.
700, yeah.
So if you have a result of 700 coming in to hit on a number of 2.5 million, when the results went up, and you remember when NASA started complaining, oh, this graph is linear, it's not changing. By that time, the Right Honorable Prime Minister had about 4-point-something million. Uhuru, the president, had about 6-point-something million. Now tell me, if you're looking at results with your naked eye, and somebody has got 4.6 million, and a transmission of 700 votes come in and hits 4.6 million, what change do you expect to see? Unless you're using a micrograph.
True.
You see, the reason why most of you and most of the people thought that this was erroneous is because you applied yourself negative to the law. The law was that every polling station, and it did not have to be, underline this, the transmission of the results per polling station did not have to be from each county or from a set of counties. If a polling station in Mandera has finished its tallying, they transmit.
Right.
If one in Mombasa has finished, they transmit. So there will be no time when you'll be saying that you're expecting to see results from Nyanza coming to make a big change.
All right.
Or results from Kiambu coming to... I mean, they're coming per polling station. And so underline first this fact so that we can deal with this argument once and for a minute, Debarl. Because this is a big question around the country. It's a big question around the country. And on the IBC, why was this graph looking this way? And remember the story. This is the story I want to deal with. There was this story that there seemed to have been a configuration of 11-point-something% that kept it consistent. The answer is no.
No.
It's no. Because once the numbers have hit a certain amount, a certain figure of plus millions, whatever number of polling stations you put, as long as they are coming consecutively per 700, you cannot expect to get the kind of change you expect to see with the eye. And remember, you're not transmitting only results for one candidate. Okay. You're transmitting for both. So it will keep changing almost a constant number, unless you have a micrograph.
I wanted to also answer a question, that, because I think also this has not been clarified. Yes. I asked you very well, from the dummy run, right, where did these provincial results really come from? Because they were not really also subjected to other stakeholders before. So did also the IBC do, from your own estimation, not do a very recommendable job in terms of communicating? Because everyone was asking, where are these numbers really coming from? We've not seen them from the dummy run, and you're not explaining. And then they went full steam ahead to say...
saying they were coming from the polling station.
Yes, that's what they're coming from the polling station. But don't you think also that was the remit, it was within the remit of IBC to explain to Kenyans where it's coming from? Because everyone was wondering.
You see, and let's deal with the issue that was raised by Miguna when he said that Chebukati said that the results that were coming in were different from that 4B. By the way, I never heard him say that.
I did say that.
I didn't even say that. What Chebukati said was simple. He said that one, those were provisional results. Two, he said at that time when NASA came to claim that Form 34Bs are not being seen, that indeed the Form 34Bs were going to come.
Exactly. Exactly my question.
On this question of the provisional results, and Miguna has used that example. On the law. Every particular country, any country where there is an election.
Okay, I'm really pressing for specifics.
Provisional results.
Yes.
Provisional results are always provided. Look at the American election, for example, when they're running it. There is always the argument here that these are projected results. But finally, and that is why the declaration has got to be done as per the law. This is now the official result. But the provisional ones are supposed to, one, deal with the question of anxiety, two, transparency, to ensure that people continue to see what's happening, and then you declare finally.
All right.
Because when you're saying that I'm wrong on the law, that is precisely what the court ruled.
No, I'm going to tell you the law.
The results as announced as per the polling station are the final results. And that is why, Debarl, whether we ask Chebukati or anyone, there is no graph that was going to be different from what we saw. As long as results are coming, for example, you see, I got about 727,000 votes myself. By the time I got my final result at the county tallying center, I had received numerous results from every polling station. Every agent was calling me, you have this here, you have this, that, you have this, that. If I was to be drawing a graph, against
All right,
my opponent.
Okay, you've made your point. You've made your point. Thank you. You've made your point. But the question is, of course, even from these, advanced democracies, what we see, maybe a case in point will be America. We'll always see there's an alert call. Okay, we have Michigan with certain number that is streaming in, and then of course you'll see now the whole tally really changing. That is a case that I think also Miguna is trying to put on the table. Why were we really shown from what counties or the constituencies were they really coming from? But there's an alert call. You always see alert call.
The president is banning here. Let him say something, and then I will tell Honorable Matangi what the law is.
You know this question now. In fact, what I thought I was actually not certain about, I am very clear now. If every polling station had 700 votes to tally, then you can tell why that gap almost remained constant.
It has to.
Because they were trickling in, they were not dropping in.
Yes.
If the rules were already laid before the elections were called, and they were very categorical, transmit straight from the polling station straight to the IEBC. Now the provisional, I would imagine, the provisional statement was, this is what we have given you, but it's subject to tallying everything in. What Senator Matangi has said is correct, that yes, he kept getting trickles of 300 from here, 200 from here. He never got a lump sum. Now, what we were expecting, and what happens in the American states, is when Michigan is completely called, then they announce that result. It's a big number, it moves big numbers. But these were trickles from every polling station was transmitting directly. Now, the last thing I want to say is the change from the Form 34B was also a midstream change, because the initial insistence by opposition and all of us knew as Kenya went into election was, let us do direct transmission, and the court pronounced itself on that, from polling station straight there. The provisional results were, because they have not all come in, this so far is what we are saying, is not the final result. The final result is what Chebukati finally announced. And we must be clear about this.
So Debarl,
yes.
First of all, my friends preface the argument with if. That is a hypothetical. They say if. They don't know.
I'm not if.
You can't argue from the position of if and then reach a conclusive conclusion. And they are purporting to be IEBC. They are purporting to know what the IEBC was doing. No, please. You expressed your opinion. That's yours. I must express mine. So I am saying you are entitled to your opinion, but your opinion must be based on facts, not suppositions. Number two, the law is this, because this is what the Court of Appeal said, which Honorable Matangi does not seem to understand. The Court of Appeal said the following. One, the election results will be announced at the polling station.
Yes.
For the presidential election, those results will be contained on Form 34A. That result will be transmitted to the constituency tallying center and the national tallying center. The constituency returning officer will convert that result into a Form 34B and will tally the polling, the tallies of all polling stations in the constituency.
But Miguna,
No, listen to me, please. There are individual forms called Form 34As. They are coming from each polling station. Remember, Nairobi has more than 3,000 polling stations.
But they include the presidential results.
Please, just listen to me.
They include the
I'm only
presidential
talking about the presidential results, please.
all
And so
the
listen
results.
to me.
They include
But they were all
Can I finish
just
what I
a-
am saying? I'm trying to tell you what
All right,
the law
let him
is.
finish. Okay, continue.
The law is this.
Don't confuse me.
No,
There are polling
confusing
stations all over the country. These polling stations will remit their results to the constituency tallying centers in Form 34As. Now, imagine all the polling stations. Now, these polling stations within the constituency, their results have to be converted into Form 34Bs, which means that Form 34B will now contain, for purposes of the presidential election, the total tallies within the constituency and who has won and who is last. This will be transmitted to the National Tallying Center. So it will be the exact same thing that came from the constituency. But the one that will contain the actual tallies, and by the way, they can be amended if in fact somebody keyed in the wrong number, and then that is why you have a returning officer at the constituency. Then the returning officer finds out that the keyed in number is different from the actual 34 A's. Then they can actually amend that in 34 B's. They will then remit this to the National Tallying Center. The National Tallying Center then adds up, confirms everything, and announces. So number two, there is nothing that has come from the IEBC saying that they were keying in the results from the constituencies and that is what we were seeing on the screen. This is my question. Where were the figures coming from? My friends purport to know where the figures were coming from. The IBC has not said so. But I want to say something about the graph. So, Honorable Matangi says there was no graph. But it's obvious. If one person has 54%, the other person has 44%, you can draw a graph if it is the same. So it doesn't have to be drawn by the IBC.
What kind of graph?
The final thing is this. No, the average and the variation.
Yes,
okay, let's not get into the metrics because yes, we'll lose a lot of this discussion.
I want to ask my friend James Mureu. He said he was an observer in Mombasa.
Yes.
And that he signed certain forms.
Yes.
Observers don't sign the results of the election.
No.
Only agents do.
No.
So who gave him the mandate to sign anything?
I didn't say I signed the results.
Yes, he said he
you're
did.
confusing people here.
And then the last
okay,
thing.
is it to clarify? Okay, just
thing,
okay.
You know, you're saying even what I know.
noted.
Or
You are
the
saying
last
what
thing
I
I will
know.
give you time to respond.
Please, let me just say this.
Let him
The
finish.
Don't
last
say
thing-
what I know.
Please,
Don't
let
say
us be
what I know.
orderly. The last thing I wanted to say is this. The fact that an office or institution is independent constitutionally does not mean it cannot be challenged or questioned. Does not mean it cannot make mistakes. In fact, if that was the case, that IBC is independent and therefore whatever it announces we must accept, then we would have a dictatorship. We cannot have that. We are trying to build.
Mureu, please, time for you to respond.
You know, Miguna, I respect you, but please don't confuse things. I said I was an observer, and at every polling station, I signed a confirmation that I've actually been through that polling station. There is a form that observers were signing,
But
which
not
I
the
did.
results.
I was not signing the results,
Fine.
for heaven's
The
sake.
results are signed by
Now,
agents.
I want to remind Miguna that these results were being transmitted straight from the polling station to the tallying, the constituency tallying center and the national tallying center. So it was a simultaneous thing. So the results were trickling in. And the only thing is, and Form 34B was coming after the 34A. 34A has already transmitted the results to both the constituency and the national tallying center. So to purport that we would have had to wait for the constituency tallying center to receive all the results, we would not still have received the national tallying results by now.
Why?
Because they were coming from different areas. So you have to wait, for example, for Kiambu tallying center to actually, the constituencies to tally all the various polling stations before they can announce at IBC. Yet, the court pronounced itself in saying, direct, this tally this and transmit direct to the National Tallying Center and to the constituency to consolidate this. So, I mean, we must be very clear. And you know, Miguna is good at twisting. You are now saying that I was signing results. I was not a returning officer.
All right, I want us to just move this conversation because we have a few minutes to wind up. Yes.
A quick one. You know, this argument is settled against what Miguna is trying to impress here by a very, very simple logic. You know, you just need to look at the interpretation and the meaning of the word polling and tallying. I mean, at a tallying center, there are no announcements for any new results that are made. Announcements as per the law are made at the polling center. The rest of the business of whether it is a county tallying center, a sub-county tallying center, or the national tallying center, the work is to tally the results as announced at the polling station. So the announcement, and Miguna mark this, the announcement at the polling station includes the presidential result.
The 34A.
The presidential result is included at the, yes. So there is no argument here that you'll be saying that you announce the other result, then the presidential ones are carried to the Darling Center, to the other one.
All right.
The result that was announced there is the final. And then lastly, you know, this story and notion about an 11% variation is really, you know, drivel. I'll tell you why. If you look at 11% variation, ask yourself if there was a constant that was fed to have an 11% variation. Did it have an 11% variation in the result, Miguna, you got against Sonko?
I did not say.
You know, did it have an 11% variation?
Right. But
you see, the results are announced at the same. I'm
you're being petty now.
No. I mean, we are being factual.
You're
because you see,
the argument.
no, my friend. Because you see, you made this point to carry it on what was the other guys were saying. That there seems to have been an 11% keyed in to keep a constant.
Okay.
But if you look at the margin which you lost, or any other person lost,
all right, Matangi.
Does it indicate an 11% variation that is keyed in the IEBC?
All right, thank you. No, don't answer. I think let's leave it at that. I think this is a matter which we're eagerly waiting to see also what NASA will do today. But my question is, first of all, looking at the page 2 of the Daily Nation today, and following also reports that we've had during yesterday, NGO boards delist human rights lobby. And of course, Kegoro says commission is used to search attacks by the agency. We've seen this has been happening for the longest time ever. And also, the Jubilee government has announced that the first 2 people it will seek to remove from the office once the 12th National Assembly begins. The proceeding is, first of all, we'll have the Auditor General and also the chair of the National Lands Commission. Why are they particularly intent on the Auditor General?
I think the statement by Mr. Aden Duale was very unfortunate. If there are 2 public servants in this country that have done their work diligently and I believe without any blemish, it is the Auditor General, Mr. Uko, and Mr. Njoroge of the Central Bank. I don't care about the chairman of the Land Commission. I think he's corrupt. Because there are credible allegations against him. So I really don't care about him. Mm-hmm. But I care about Ouko and I care about Njoroge. These 2 officers have been so diligent and have been so unimpeachable that anyone who comes in to say that they should be removed whimsically on the basis that you have a majority is unfortunate. So I believe that the Jubilee administration need to rein in Mr. Aden Duale because he's become rogue. The statements that he made look bad on the side of Jubilee. Winning does not mean that now you become a dictatorship. Now you haunt public servants that have done their work diligently with tenure. There is no credible allegations against Mr. Edward Ouko for which he should be subjected to intimidation, harassment, or threats. And I believe that the president needs to speak about this. I personally believe that right now, those who have won should be talking about food security, should be talking about corruption, should be talking about building a nation, eradicating corruption, dealing with those national issues that will unite us, not issues that will divide us. So the elections are over. Those who are aggrieved by the elections will, if they so deem it fit, contest them democratically. And that is what we want. But these erratic statements being made by people like Aden Duale as threats against perceived public servants is completely unfortunate, particularly when he singles out a public servant that comes from the same ethnicity as the Right Honorable Prime Minister. You see, it just looks bad optically. So I don't think that is appropriate.
All right, so do you
now,
think
regarding the NGO board, the listing human rights lobbies, I don't know. I don't know the evidence, whether or not they have evidence against the NGO board, the Kenya Human Rights Commission. I listened to Mr. Kegoro yesterday and he said that he would be going to court. So if they go to court, the court will decide whether or not the delisting was legally done or not.
All right.
So I will withhold my judgment on that.
Okay, withhold your judgment on this, but of course, do you also read a dark underbelly on this when it comes right after maybe the general election, and of course we have Duale making this statement, and of course also the registering of Kenya Human Rights Commission. They've been very vocal And of course, they've questioned the entire process of the electioneering, exercise itself.
Debarl, unfortunately, I haven't seen that statement. But if it was said that is what Duale has said, it's very unfortunate. However, I want to say this, and I made that statement at the beginning of this conversation, that politicians have taken Kenya as a hostage country. They speak about things that they should not be speaking about. For example, it is, if Duale has said that, it's very, very unfair, particularly to civil servants who must continue. And we must develop a culture where civil servants continue being civil servants, whoever the master, whoever becomes the president. That is the only way we're going to see this country on its right and straight path. But if now all the civil servants are holding their breath and waiting to see whether they will qualify to continue serving, civil servants are permanent almost. They should remain protected and they should not be threatened. I want to say this with due respect to Duale and probably the statement he has issued, and I said I haven't seen it yet. But I believe Ouko has done a good job, and he deserves to be held with some more respect than that. The National Land Commission has had its day. Every one of us, none of us is perfect. But it would be wrong for us to condemn them wholesomely. Yes, we can raise flag issues where they have failed and also praise them in equal measure where they have excelled. Now, on the issue of the NGO board delisting the human rights, Debarl, I have seen some serious inconsistency in these human rights lobby groups. When human beings, policemen are as human as any one of us. Now, when you see rioting mobs killing a policeman, and I've witnessed that in Mombasa, where they butchered policemen in Mombasa, the Memon roundabout, and immediately after that, the policemen now fired live bullets and also killed a few people. Now, nobody talked about the slain policemen. Nobody. The human rights went silent about, and instead started following the people who provoked. So when these human rights are advocating for rights, they must appreciate that everyone has their rights. And policemen in this country have lost their lives in the line of duty, but the Human Rights Commission are dead quiet about this. And that is where I don't respect some of them. They actually just ignore the policemen. They are human beings. They have families, they have children, they die in their cause of defending this country. So when you say excessive force, if I'm holding a gun and you're holding a big boulder and you have thrown it at me, I'm risking my life. If a boulder lands on my head, I'm dead. I'm holding a gun. You are an aggressor and you should be dealt with. I'm sorry I sound hard, but that is the truth. If you are staying in your house, for example, the people who lost their lives, and I say this with due respect, the people who lost their lives immediately after the results were announced were in the wrong place. Stay in your house. If Raila wants to contest the results, let him go to court. After all, he's the one who was seeking that elective post.
Some of them were in their houses.
I don't know those details.
Some of them were in their houses.
I don't know the details.
The police have admitted that.
Yes, I said I don't know the details. But I'm saying if that happened, it's very wrong. But those who were caught in the streets, blockading roads, I have every right to go to my place of work or go anywhere. And you cannot exercise your right at the expense of my rights. So if you're caught in that crossfire, for heaven's sake, you deserve to be punished.
All right, I wanted just also to ask you in regard to what is happening, especially with Auditor General, because we've seen also the government has been particularly intent in trying to sort of really cripple the entire office of the Auditor General itself, even with the Public Auditor Act right now, where we saw it was really they really pushed the envelope to try and also make sure that some of the functions of the Auditor General are not really with domicile in his office. Some of them are taken to the Public Service Commission as well.
That would be a tragedy for this country. That would be a tragedy.
Okay, that's why I'm asking this question.
We must give the Auditor General.
If you lean back a bit.
Yes, we must give the Auditor General that freedom to flag issues. That's why every right-functioning company needs an audit at the end of their trading period, so that they can actually identify not just whether they've done well, but where they've not done well and why they have not done well.
So the question is,
Auditor General has carried
is there
that
a dark underbelly in all this? With the public auditor act right now in place, now also trying to oust the Auditor General himself?
It would be a tragedy for this country if they stifled the powers of the Auditor General. Because for a long time, he has been that voice that raises and flags issues that have gone astray in our country.
Thank you. Do you think the Auditor General, he's being stifled, of course, his powers?
Debarl, let me first say that you see, Parliament convenes next week, and members of the Assembly, either National or Senate, will be sworn in at the same time. That's when the House also determines its agenda, and I think any matter or issue that's going to be discussed or dealt with by Parliament is going to be on the table at that particular time. Right now, Parliament is still not formed, and so I don't think that any discussion on what either the agenda of Parliament, what will be undertaking, is valid now. You know, those decisions are normally made by a committee. You know, we have a House Business and Rules Committee that determines the agenda and the business of the House. These comments, as you have said, which are attributed to Honorable Duale, actually I'm not aware of them personally. So I will not be commenting on them. But my comment will be, as I've said, that once in both houses, after swearing in of members of Parliament, and the houses convene, the election of a speaker and a deputy speaker, then there will be a committee formed. And that committee will determine the business of the House. Now, on this issue of the Auditor General, remember we had this debate extended here the last time.
Yes.
And what were the issues around the Auditor General's office? And remember some of the proposed changes to the Auditor General's office. And we really went into detail about this. The changes that time that had been proposed into the Auditor General's office were just simply to make sure that the staff who are recruited into the Auditor General's office fall under the purview of the Public Service Commission. That was all. That was the only issue. That they're answerable to the body that is entrusted by law in this country to take up the welfare and issues regarding workers. That was the change. And remember, the earlier version of it was that the Auditor General would be able to recruit staff in his office who did not fall under that purview or that regulation. And so in that thought line that gave him what you would call independence, including recruiting people into his office independently who are not under the regulations of the PSC, that was the whole issue. But otherwise, in as far as do these people who are recruited into the Auditor General's office meet the criteria and qualifications as required by law to serve in the office of the Auditor General, I think that was the only issue. But in as far as the powers of the Auditor General himself are concerned, and I want to say firmly, because I've been a member of the Public Accounts Committee in the Senate, and it's work that I'll be very keen to continue to carry out in the next Senate, God willing. I know that the Auditor General's office has played a very, very key role in ensuring that there is not only transparency but accountability, especially in county governments after the formation of these units in devolution. Because if, for example, I am sure we didn't have the Auditor General's office functioning the way it was functioning, we would have had a total disaster, much more in a grander scale than there was. You see, if you look at the report of the Auditor General's office, when we closed business in Parliament, he was attributing a loss of more than 200 billion to all counties collectively of public money. So you can imagine, still with the watchdog role that office was playing, that they would still report such massive losses, supposing they were not there. So I think, to sum it all up, the office of the Auditor General plays a very, very important role in running of the public affairs of this country, and especially in public funding. And certainly the best way to move would be to support that particular office and ensure that accountability is held much more. If you look at the election results now, it shows us that quite a very good percentage of governors lost their jobs. New ones have come in. And you never know who amongst those who have come in. You could have probably a reincarnation of some of the old lot who left and who seriously looted public coffers.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So suddenly we require to have somebody at the gate who
Right.
is able to lock it and say, you can't steal money.
My director,
from
Jackie, she's kicking me out of the studios right now. I don't even think I have time for you to give a closing remark,
But
sir.
the independence,
The independence
of the Auditor General's office
is very
has
key.
to be constitutional,
Thank
has
you.
to be legal, operational, administrative. So you can't put hamper in terms of employing
Thank you.
Workers.
All right, thank
My
you.
parting shot.
10 seconds you've been
Yes,
given by my
yes.
director.
We have business to do. We have a country after this election. My plea is let the businessmen continue doing their businesses. Let the politicians do their politics and leave us to do what we know.
Thank you very much. James Mureu, the Vice Chair of Kenya Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Miguna, the former Nairobi gubernatorial candidate, and also...
My closing remark.
You gave a closing remark. And also, Kimani or Matangi, thank you very much also for availing yourself this morning. Thank you also for your valid company and sharing your morning. My name is Debarl Inea.